show you the proposed ordinance from, all the different changes and the input that you gave us several months ago. And Jim Hutzelman, who's been the lead on this, is going to get up and kind of give you some of the highlights that have been proposed. And the intent is to be able to gather input on what you see. And we'll be able to take it up until about April 15th, any of your input, because it's anticipated right now that this will be taken to the board in May. Okay? Over here we have Eunice Oliver. She's going to be writing down the notes as when we get to the input, any of the comment period. So she'll be taking down any of the comments, and then we'll actually get those posted up to the web also, so you can make sure that make sure your comment is up there and that we've captured it accurately. We have Sophie Bayardo in the back, who has been a big help to Jim on all this. We've got Christine Love, who is from real estate. And I suppose you don't care who I am, right?
Your husband.
I'm Jareen Rosato, and I'm from our external relations, and so I'll be your facilitator for the evening. And we have a couple of our officers who have been working along with Jim and the team for helping with the ordinance development all along the way. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jim, who's going to give you the highlights.
Good evening, everybody. Is there anybody who wasn't at one of the previous meetings that we had way back when in last October? Okay. I'll hit some of the highlights from those just so you get a feel for what it is we talked about the first time around, and then we'll launch into the actual ordinance that has been developed up to this point as a proposal. Again, my name's Jim Hutzelman. I'm with the Business Development and Marketing Department at the Port. So one of my jobs is to see things that go on in the parks and open spaces, handle special events and different things such as vending ordinances and you name it. If it happens out there between us and real estate and harbor police, we all primarily work together on those types of issues and uses on the waterfront. So this is what we'll talk about. We'll go through the previous meetings again, and these are the particular things we talked about. We went over the current situation that we have down on the waterfront, the existing ordinances we have in place right now, who we researched and benchmarked off of when we were looking at possible changes to the ordinances, what the ordinances should address, and then we'll go into the proposed ordinance, which was given to you as a handout tonight, and of course take any questions and input that you have. Again, these are, again, for those who weren't at the previous one, these are the kind of things we talked about at the last meeting. The fact that the waterfront's growing substantially and has grown since the time when we developed all these ordinances. Some of these, it scares you to see how old they are. We have some late 1980s things that were written with some minor changes to them. And since that time, of course, we've had major redevelopments on the waterfront, the convention center expansion, more hotel development, things like that. We also, because of these things, we're drawing more people down there to conventions and other events. We're having bigger and more events down on there. So we're seeing a lot more traffic down there to the open spaces and to our tenants and into the parks and so forth. We prohibit commercial sales on the waterfront with the exception of a permit. And currently we have a company, Quality Coast, that operates a small number of street kitchens and merchandise booths there, and that's one each at this point. As I mentioned before, one of the reasons that we're looking at our ordinance, along with the ordinances, probably needing to be a little bit more clear than they are right now, is there have been complaints about the blocking of walkways and thoroughfares due to the activity on the waterfront. Aggressive behavior, people selling nearby our tenants who are rent-paying tenants, damage to public and tenant properties, and in some cases, not a whole lot, but in some cases some noise issues as well. The ordinances that we have right now that regulate vending and entertainer type performance activity are three. There's 8.02, which primarily covers the parks. So while they describe everything we have in the parks, there's also a discussion of what's allowed and not allowed in the parks. You name it, from everything from smoking, which was the last update we did, to playing with flames and different things like that. So it's a long laundry list of what's allowed in the port parks. And included in that is some of the things that relate to entertainers and free speech activity. Okay? And then 8.04 regulates nonprofit organizations selling commercial merchandise on the waterfront. So there's regulations in there that address that. And then 8.05 is just a single paragraph that we have that requires a port-issued permit for conducting business or commercial activities, performing or entertaining on the tidelands, which is the port's jurisdiction along the waterfront. So that's everything that we have in place right now. And because it's spread out over three ordinances, and because we want it to be more clear than it is right now, we've taken those and consolidated much of that information into a single proposed ordinance, which is the 8.05 that you have. So what that 8.05 is going to do is supersede all of this middle one, 8.04, And so include much of that information from 8.04 here into 8.05, and then the parts of that 8.02, the parks one, that address that entertainer and free speech protected activity, those are folded into it as well. So at the end of the day, we plan to still have an 8.02 that talks about the parks, and then an 8.05 that covers vendor and entertainer free speech activity. Okay, so that's essentially where we want to be at the end of the day. As we told you before, we didn't do this in a vacuum. We wanted to look and see where other ordinances existed, primarily ones that had been updated recently based on different court decisions and city policies. So we looked at Balboa Park, Seattle, Washington, San Francisco, Santa Monica, and Los Angeles. Again, this is something we stressed the last time we were here, the fact that our ordinances, we want to address the need for an active, vibrant, and safe waterfront. It has a lot of things for people to come and do and enjoy. We also want to have space that's allotted in a fair and equitable manner. The need for clear definitions and requirements, our ordinance, regulating vending and entertainment activities. So these are the goals that we've had all along. I want you to know we're very much in favor of having a lot going on down on the waterfront that people can come and enjoy, but by the same token, there are reasons for regulating what happens there in the interest of public safety and the other businesses that exist down there. So, I'm going to go into the highlights now of the ordinance, and if you want to follow this along, I'm going to grab my copy as well, and we'll kind of walk through relatively quickly. I want to let you know, even if it seems I'm going through this a little more quickly than you'd actually like, word by word, the opportunity exists for you to take this with you also afterward and get a chance to digest it, let it kind of flow through. You've got an email address that you can email us to. If you want other contact information, you can provide that as well. But the Port of San Diego website will provide you an email address through that to give your feedback to us. So we're very much wanting to hear what your interest and input is on this as well. Okay? So, first of all, like any of our ordinances relate to our open spaces or a particular territory, there's a description there in the beginning of the different parks that we have in open spaces. So it talks about Coronado Landing, Chula Vista Bayside, and so forth. So these are more geographic descriptions here that I won't go into. What's also there are terms related to vending and performing. So things like, and we'll get into these definitions that we have here first, allotted space and designated area. As we walk through the ordinance, we'll talk about what those things mean. What's meant by a donation, what food, goods, and merchandise. So some very, very basic terminology here, but we want to make sure it's understood what those terms are so that consequently you understand what's allowed and prohibited within the ordinances. What it means to be a performer or performing or vendor or vending. So that's all that information is in there for you to be able to comb through, and again, at your leisure, when you want to go through this with more detail, feel free to do so and give us your feedback. But if there's anything you have in there right now, I'm glad to entertain those questions. I'd like you, if you could, hold those till we're finished, and then we'll have a chance to hear what everybody's got to say and address those things. Okay. So the next part of it, of course, is very legalese, findings and purposes, which are provides the reasons for regulating vending. We want to make sure that it's understood that why there's actually regulations out there. So there's a long discussion in there of how we have these popular parks and open spaces and promenades and things out there that people want to come and enjoy, and that we need to circulate people through there so that that enjoyment continues, that it's a safe environment, that people can see the bay, that the businesses that are down there aren't adversely impacted. So a lot of justification about that circulation, ingress, egress, and again, views and different things along the quality of life and the quality of people's experience on the waterfront. Okay. So that's that next section. And then there's a section that is an actual prohibition of vending. It says, except as specifically allowed in this section, in this 8.05, no vending is allowed on the public highlands without a permit issued by the district, which is the Port of San Diego. Okay. And then we get into the real meat of this thing, which is that regulating of time, place, and manner of vending and activity. So if you turn to page 5, and there toward the bottom in section D, it starts talking about vending in designated areas. And it goes into the types of items that can be vended. So the expressive speech items are listed in there. And it gives examples of those things: newspapers, leaflets, pamphlets, bumper stickers, and/or buttons. Now that's, those are allowed within certain circumstances, and as we go through this, we'll talk about what those are. You can vend the following items which have been created, written, or performed by the vendor. So there's a list there of anything that can be vended, and some of the examples of that you see in there are books, audio, video, other recordings of performances, paintings painted and signed by the person who's vending the items, photographs taken and signed by the person vending the items, prints made and signed of paintings or photographs painted or made by the person vending the items, sculptures made and signed by the person, any other items that inherently communicative and has nominal value apart from its communication. So the things that are of considered value beyond what they're communicating through the piece are considered to be prohibited from being vended on the waterfront. So, you with me so far? Okay. There's other discussion there about expressive purposes and so forth. Again, it talks about nominal utility. And then it goes into nonprofit organizations. So a vendor must constitute a nonprofit organization. That's somebody who is vending an expressive item on behalf of that organization's mission. So if anybody is out there doing expressive type activity and selling the product of their art, they don't have to be a nonprofit organization. They can be representing themselves. But when it comes to the organizations that are selling the types of messaged material, be it the T-shirts, bumper stickers, and things like that, those need to be expressive and inextricably intertwined, see if you can say that 5 times fast, with the mission of the organization. So if it's environmental and it's about preserve the bay, something like that, that T-shirt would need to have something to the effect of preserve San Diego Bay. If it's merely, and I'm not picking on T-shirt vendors or anything, this is one of the easier ones to look at, is if it's just out there and it just has a tie-dye type of design on it, is that inextricably intertwined with the organization's message? It's not, so that would be a prohibited item. Okay? So again, that communication of the organization's message is the key. All right? Merchandise, again, message informative of the purpose of the organization. Okay? And then it gets into the allocation and use of designated areas, and this is some kind of new terminology here too, so I want to make sure everybody understands this, because this is the point at which we start talking about the map here and the different spaces that we're currently allotting. Again, this is in a proposed format, so I can see some tweaks already that we'll probably be making to this based on things we've heard so far. So I'll be interested in hearing as you walk down the waterfront with me, which is what our staff did to develop this, what concerns or issues that you have as we go back through and take your comments. Okay? So what we basically did with the waterfront is designate 12 different areas, which we call designated areas. Seemed like an explicable term. With a capacity of 72 vendors in what we refer to as allotted spaces. So these particular areas are in the cities of San Diego, Chula Vista, and Coronado. And 9 of the places are in San Diego, as you can imagine, from primarily the north and south Embarcadero, most of it's north Embarcadero, down to Seaport Village. And then there are 2 areas in Coronado, right on the waterfront there, and then there's 1 in Chula Vista. So 1 through 9 are here in San Diego, where I think most people are interested. We do have some T-shirt vending that does occur over in Coronado, but I haven't seen anything happen in Chula Vista, so we'll kind of concentrate on San Diego unless anybody has other questions about the other cities. So it makes the allotted spaces, so it's got capacity of a total of 72 vendors. On a first-come, first-served basis, these places are available. The number and size of allotted spaces depending on the designated area. So each designated area is either going to have spaces that are okay for a 4x4 footprint for someone or a 6x8. Now most of these are going to have 6x8s because we have a wide enough promenade or open space there that we think they can be fit in there. There's some areas we're going to confine it to 4x4, and it might just be entertainment activities, things like that. But if you have a footprint that's only 4x4, then that's fine too. But again, most of these are probably going to be able to handle 6x8. We've had some feedback already about trying to expand some of them, and we'll address that based on, again, what we hear. So that's what you'll see inside this map when we show it too, is whether it has 4x4s or 6x8s inside the designated area. It requires buffers between allotted spaces and, of course, prohibits blocking of ingress and egress, typical public safety and don't interfere with the person next to you kind of kind of things. Places limits on the sizes of anything that's associated with the booth or the setup. So umbrellas, the different, how many sides you can have on the particular setup or booth. Any boards, tables, you've got a sign size limitation there, display board size, guidelines, things along those lines. So it's some of the physical types of requirements for the individual setups. And then here's some other prohibitions on bartering, reserving, or exchange of spaces. One of the things I heard periodically was people coming out at dark 30 in the morning to reserve spaces, and that's prohibited in the spaces here. It sets the hours for the setup and takedown of items in the allotted spaces, and we've heard some feedback about that too. Right now, we're showing 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. And one of the things we were asked was, could you make it more along the lines of 7 a.m. or even earlier was a question too. So we'll consider that one. But again, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are about that as well. Prohibits open flames, combustible fuel generators. All right, so we are concerned about things burning and blowing up on the waterfront. So we do prohibit that. Allows for the use of allotted spaces for permitted special events or construction. So from time to time, if we have a construction project or a special event that's occurring out on the waterfront, we may, and are okay to ask briefly that someone engaged in vending or expressive activity out there that's authorized otherwise under the ordinance, that you move, and we will try to find a place with reasonable access that still has, everybody's about foot traffic. Anybody that's trying to get their things seen or bought or looked at is about having foot traffic go by. And we understand that completely. So the thought is, even though there may be some temporary moves, we're certainly going to do our level best to make sure that an alternative place is provided. Can't guarantee it, but we'll take a look at some alternatives with you too. Okay. So then, some typical things you'd expect: keeping the allotted spaces clean and so forth. Requests for other designated areas. This is if you happen to notice, if you got the map and you've seen a place that you think could be usable and is otherwise not, doesn't constitute a place that would interfere with traffic walking on the tidelands, or otherwise doesn't affect public safety or any other businesses out there, then of course we'll consider taking a look. And I think it calls for a written request for that. We would certainly consider, if somebody has a great idea for another place that might be able to be used, we'd be willing to look at that and consider it. Okay. And then talks about the Port District's property for vending, performing, or display prohibited. That's, don't hang things on the light poles, trees, all that type of stuff, which, general consideration for public property, which, most people are pretty respectful of it. And then exemptions. The ordinance does not apply to permitted activities, which primarily means things like special events or permitted businesses that are out there, and participants, again, in special events. So it does provide for penalties. It does make a statement in there that penalties do exist as a recourse for the port for violations of the ordinance. Okay? So that's kind of quickly through what the verbiage is that's in the ordinance. Again, I urge you to take a comb through it, take a look at it. We'd be glad to listen to any feedback that you have when the time comes. Oops. Got ahead of myself. I've got on another file here what that map looks like that you've got in another handout, so we'll take a look at that. Okay, the first page that you see on the map is this look at the areas. And one thing to keep in mind about this is those particular boxes that show Area 1, Area 2, and so forth that are outlined with dotted lines. What's inside those dotted lines, that's what the detail area is that's on the rest of the attachment. So that doesn't mean that we're allowing vending across Harbor Drive there. It just shows in there what area is covered by that particular drawing. And once you get to that particular drawing, you'll see the area inside that box that's actually the designated area for vending. Okay. So we're not going to put anybody right in the middle of promenades or streets or anything like that. It'll all be in safe areas along the walkways. So that's the first 7 areas, and as you continue on south, I'll walk you through these individually as we go along. Then we get into 7, 8, and 9 as you come back around down the bend toward the south of Market Arrow and Seaport Village and Market Arrow Park North area, and then you get to see Area 10 over at Chula Vista Bayside Park. and then areas 11 and 12 over on the Coronado side. Okay. So let's take a look at what those individual areas are. And the first thing to note is this permittees is not a good word to have on here. So part of our draft, and this is, get rid of permittees. That's just the capacity of that area is for 6 users. Okay. So this is an area, what you're going to also see on this particular one is the dimensions of the area. But basically, what we allow inside here are 6 permittees at 6 by 8 apiece. Okay. So this is the, you want to know where this is probably. This is up just south of Grape Street where the promenade widens up there near where Hornblower has their ticket area for well, it's the ferries, but it's the well, it's not just the harbor excursions, it's the ones that are chartered. That was the word I was looking for. So the charter ones, the dinner cruises and things like that they do are up on there on the north end. So that's where this one is. Okay. And again, I'll take your questions when we've got a chance to go through it. Okay. So that's area for 6. Now here's that second area, which is just up on the north side of Anthony's. And so that being 6 feet wide, we can put 4 6 by 8s into that area. Okay. Oops. Then you have a small area here. This is right, everybody know where Anthony's delivery entrance is up in here? There are 2 small spaces in there. We may end up cutting those back to 4 by 4s, but right now we got them at 6 by 8s. I think they may work there. Now, the whole area south of Anthony's, almost the entire area between Anthony's and B Street is about 350 feet long. So inside that area, we could have 6 by 8s there, and that would be for 8 users. The reason that we didn't just make it potential for wall-to-wall is because if you start massing a lot of people along there, then it becomes a circulation issue. So we thought at this point that we would try it with 8 and see if it ever does become crowded there, if any changes need to be made, or if 8 can fit there comfortably if the time comes. Now here we are at between Broadway and Navy Piers. So this is a fairly narrow area down here because you have benches. So that's a 4-foot wide one. So these would be 4 by 4 with 6 allowed. And here we are in the plank boardwalk south of Navy Pier. And so all these particular areas here, right now they're designated as 6 by 8. With room in between all the planters that are there. We're getting ready here pretty shortly to actually put cherry trees inside those. They're flowering cherry trees that we received from the Japanese consulate as a gift of friendship. So those are going to be inside those planters, and in between the planters we anticipate being able to have a lot of expressive activity if there's interest there. And then here we are continuing south. We're south of G Street, where that triangle up at the very top of the drawing is the USS San Diego Memorial. So just to give you an idea. And then, of course, the fish market's out on G Street Mall there to the west. So here are some more. These are going to have to be 4 by 8s right now for 3 permittees in these areas. Oh, pardon me, 4 by 4s. And then area 8, we're down in Seaport Village area at the Embarcadero Marina Park North. So this is, of course, the walkway, the promenade going to Seaport Village. So along here, we've got space for 3 6 by 8s here. And then we were going to keep these at 4 by 4s. We have heard some feedback that if we could put 1 or 2 that are bigger, say 4 by 8s or something like that. We're not married to either 4 by 4 or 6 by 8. If there are ways to stretch things a little bit, we'll consider those too. but there was a request to do a little bit more along that curved walkway too, in terms of giving capacity for somebody who could do more of a setup there. Okay, so that's some of the feedback we've heard there. And then next one is right along the walkway there, the riprap, which is all the the rocks and the stones and things that go down here into San Diego Bay. This is continuing the walkway in Embarcadero Marina Park North. This is an area too where it's pretty narrow there, so we would allow 8 permittees, and those would be right now 4x4s. Okay. So that's the first 9 areas, and then we get into the I don't know, 10 is down here. This is that the Coronado Tidelands Park done? Okay. Pardon me, that's Chula Vista Bayside Park. So we've had very little activity down there. That's the center of the 3 parks down on the Chula Vista Bayfront. And then somehow this got a little bit out of order. But up at the very top here are the ones in Coronado. This is Coronado Tidelands Park right at the edge of the parking lot, which again, I haven't seen much activity there, but we could go with 3 6x8s into here. And then if you go further out toward the condominiums there, just to the north side, you see Coronado Point Condominium Complex there. This is where we've had some t-shirt vendors on here, but those remain in place. Now, much of this, we preserved practically every area that was in the old 8.04, and if you will notice that we also expanded it. We had a total capacity in the 30s for the number of people who could be out, in the designated areas that existed in the previous ordinance, and now we're at 72. So what we hope to be able to do is expand some of the opportunities and some of the space that's available. And again, with more foot traffic happening down there, we think some of these places might be, might actually be good places for people to set up. One thing to keep in mind about all this, though, is, first of all, this is a work in progress. So again, we're taking input on what it can look like. The second thing is, as construction progresses, for example, on the north Embarcadero, one thing we realized that we did when we put this together is in Zone 6, we think it's a little bit too close to where the new flagship cruises and events, I don't know if you've seen it down there, they're building that at the foot of Navy Pier, that 16 by 400 foot wide pier down there at the foot of the pier. Well, that's going to be where we place some of that Area 6 is going to be in the way there, so we will need to make a little bit of a change down there to accommodate that. So we're seeing some of these things happen. That just shows you kind of how this is a living document at this point that we want to hear what people have to say about. All right, so moving right along. We're at that point where we will take questions and input. And with that, I'll turn it over to our moderator, Doreen Rosado.
Okay, so, hang on. Give the girl a chance to get up here. So, just as a reminder, I know many of you that were here before, we covered this before. We want to get everybody's input. We want to be able to cover everybody's thoughts, opinions, make sure that Eunice can get them captured. So please be as concise as you can with your statements. One at a time. It's kind of just common courtesy that we'd ask that each of you is allowed to speak your thought completely. There's no right or wrong on this. There's a more than likely chance that we've got some differing opinions, and every person does have that viewpoint, so please be respectful of that. Appreciate and respect the individuality. Everybody's different. Please be calm. Please. I'm begging again. Okay? I told you earlier I'd beg, I'd still beg. Wait until I'll call upon you, so we'll go one by one, and I want to make sure that we call on everybody. So if you've got your hand up and you've spoken already, but we've had a couple of others that still have, I'm probably going to go to them first and then come back to you. So we'll try to get everybody in. And then this one is really important. Let's focus on the new stuff. So if we've heard the information, we've got it captured, let us hear about the new information. Because please believe that we've got it up there. We're not going to write it a second time necessarily, so we want to make sure that we really have the new information to kind of value everybody's time. We really appreciate you coming out here. I know everybody's worked hard all day and probably wants to get home to families and dinner and all that good stuff, so we want to be as efficient as we possibly can. So with that, who's first? I'm going to go 1, 2, and you 3. Yeah? Remember your numbers. I'm
I've
going to
heard,
ask, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to stand up so everybody can hear.
people can hear me, I can talk loudly. Jim mentioned users, permits, maybe that's interchangeable. The bottom line to me is, will this be handled through coast, or can we get a permit just for the space we want? Whether it's 4x4 or 6x8, how is that going to work out? I think that's what everybody here wants to hear.
I think we are not going to be issuing permits. The only commercial vending that we're going to have is through Quality Coast. Now, the other vending that can occur out here is on behalf of the nonprofit organizations who are selling things, again, inextricably intertwined with their message, and of course, anybody who is creating performance type of art. So if, the list of things that we had, photographs, paintings, sculptures, all the different creative works that are the original work of the artist there. If it's the CD that you've made with your music, that can be sold out there as well. Okay.
Sir?
Yeah, I've been to the meetings. My main concern is that the individual in question, she's going to be vending, but she is a Mazatec Indian.
Sorry, can you speak up a little bit?
She is a Mazatec Indian, and most of her crafts and artwork will be made available by donation, and she's basically representing herself and her art. Does she require permits?
Yeah, we look again. Is it original, created work? That is hers.
That is indigenous to the culture, and it's
Hers is the question.
And so no permit required, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, one thing to keep in mind is what we're doing in terms of permitting and not permitting is, at this point, for that expressive activity, we are not issuing permits. With the understanding that we're hoping that the behavior and the way everybody comports themselves and is human to everybody else and something that's acceptable, that we don't need to ever try and overregulate.
Okay. And to close my questions, given that activity, is it not donation only or commercial enterprise?
She can actually, she can put a sign out there with what it costs, if it's, again, her creative.
Indigenous art and her own handicraft.
You keep telling me indigenous arts, but her own handicraft, okay.
It can't be from a multiple group of,
No, it's
Right.
exclusive to her culture, and she's a craftsperson who actually makes the artifacts. That's basically what it comes out. Okay, just wanted
And
to
again, it's understanding what the types of items are too. We had that list of things that's there.
correct.
Okay, so to put the caveat on
At
that.
first glance, it really falls into the category of general merchandise or exchangeable merchandise to other vendors. So
Okay,
I
so
see what you're saying.
I'd review that specific list and see what falls in there.
No, I get it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sir? And then,
Okay, I have a couple of questions and concerns. The first thing that I would like to question about is, for example, there are several performers in the harbor that are considered icons. They've been there for several years. People come back every year to see, like myself, I do roses and stuff. There's the Silver Man that comes out. He's not here today. There's also the couple of magicians in Seaport Village that have been there for 10, 20 years or something like that. I'm wondering if there's anything that y'all can do for the performers that have been there for a long time, like maybe make the spot a spot special for the ones that have been in a special spot for a long time, which goes along with the second question or concern. On area number 3, it shows you 2 allotted spaces at 6 by 8 feet. Both of them, according to the way this map looks, now I work in front of Anthony, so I know Anthony's really well. According to the way this map looks, it looks like we're crammed right in front of the front door of Anthony's. And they've got a coffee cart on one side, and then on the other side they've got their sign to where it explains what they have and everything.
We'll take a closer look at that one if we miss.
But
Put that one
where that works real well is it's across from each other rather than...
it's slightly north of their front door, and they've got some planters there, and so and then there's they're kind of their back of the house. They've got a screened area where they bring in their provisioning, and their trash comes just slightly north of their the main entrance, not where the coffee cart is, not where the fish shed is, but their main front doors, slightly north to that. That's where those two spots are.
Yeah, well, again, like I said, I've been there for 8 years now, and that doesn't work for me at all. Like, I've been right in front of the door on that little concrete thing. The Silverman's been right to the side. And, you know, people have known to look for us in that spot for the last 8 years. So to move us over to Caddy Corner to the little shade and shadows where, you know, we won't be as seen as well would be detrimental to what we've been doing.
We'll look at that particular spot again. Now, in answer to your first question, we are going to remain on a first-come, first-served basis in the interest of fairness and opportunity for everybody who comes out.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to address area 9, although I don't use that area. It pretty much looks like this, right here, and that's where you have the spaces set up. And I was wondering if it's possible that you could move the spaces over to the grass, being that when people walk down the walkway, they're going to want to see the bay. They're going to want to see the boats. They don't want to, you know, it's going to be obstructed. And then there's not a lot of space really between the rock and the sidewalk.
Okay, we can look at that one on the inboard side. One reason to kind of keep it more on the sidewalk side is it decreased any damage that could be done to the grass there too. But understanding it is a relatively narrow area there, we were looking at that one. It's somewhere between 4 and like 5 or 6 feet at the most there before you hit the rocks. And they're on the edge.
Plus it obstructs the view for the visitors.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3.
I was wondering, are these spaces going to be marked on the ground? Or
No.
how is that
That's
determined?
we really don't want to
Right.
do that to the pavement
How
out
do you
there.
determine where your space is?
Well, that's the good, and I appreciate your asking that question because each of these areas has a capacity to it. So inside that particular designated area, if you want to, take up a 6 by 8 footprint, that's great. And there's typically going to be room for that entire capacity, the 2 feet in between, regardless of where you set up. People can set up around you, or you can set up around people who are already in there. So we didn't want to put blocks on the waterfront like that, and I hope we don't reach that point that we've got, everybody's on, treats each other with respect out there and goes into the particular designated areas and doesn't cause those issues.
Okay, I just have one more question. My art is fused glass, and it can come in the form of like a platter or a hanging that you put on the wall or a pendant. And so I'm concerned about your wording saying jewelry because it could fall under jewelry, and I'm kind of concerned that, I won't be able to express anything because basically all the things here are paper, mostly paper and sculptures, photographs, paintings, or, canvas, whatever. So how do I address that?
I'll table that one and see what where it falls in.
Okay, thanks.
Sir?
Just to be sure, for as long as I remember, you had a long-standing stern rule against posted prices. Are you saying now that we're allowed to post a price?
That's what the ordinance is not prohibiting. So by virtue of it not prohibiting that, it's, you are allowed, the only thing that restrictions put on you is 2 square foot sign is there. So, yeah, we had been into that before, and there was the whole, game of, whether it was a donation or not, and
Is there a
posting
reason why
prices, so.
it's specifically 4 by 4 feet? I mean 2 square feet, because my sign, I'm a carriage driver, so I have a 2 by 3 feet sign. Is there a reason why?
Just in the interest, we're trying to reduce any kind of, extra signage and blight and things, not that your signs necessarily blight, but in the interest of aesthetics, that's,
But on that sign,
and that was,
now, I'm
yeah.
not prohibited to post the price for a carriage.
if your other, if what you're doing is otherwise authorized under the ordinance. That's when we pass the ordinance too. If we pass it, if our board gives us stuff.
You done?
Yeah, I was rambling, and must be getting tired or hungry.
Well, let me preface my concerns by saying, job well done. One of the concerns I had the last meeting I came was that I wanted you guys to find a way to give artists more rights, not less rights. And I love that you're not prohibiting us from actually getting a fair price for our art. You know, because before with donations, we kind of got screwed sometimes. So I do applaud that I don't have to give up my art for free. You know, I can actually put a dollar amount on it, so I thank you guys for that. I would like you guys to look between area 1 and 2. I think there's a lot of space there. That's where I set up. I set up right in front of the HMS Surprise. And I also, when I set up there, I also mark off the distance between the Maritime Museum and the curb, and I make sure I'm not taking up any more space than the Maritime Museum is taking. So I really do. And there's 8.5 feet clearance from the front of my counter to, for walking, which is more than the Maritime Museum has. So I would like you guys to look at that area between zone 1 and 2. The other concern I have is, I used to work in amusement parks, and when it opens at 9 o'clock, you have the running of the bulls. So I'm wondering, how do you regulate these spots if you're not allowed to reserve it? It opens at 9. What kind of plan do you have? Because I see people, what is reserving it? The spot's there and I'm standing here right at 9, it's mine. What is going to determine how people get those spots? It's easy to say first come, first serve, but when you have a starting time on it, how do you make sure that there's fairness and, that people aren't getting irritated because, someone's waiting in the parking lot since 6 for that, you know what I'm trying to say? Yeah, there just seems like there's going to be all kinds of issues if you have a starting time that they cannot reserve it before.
In the past, what the existing ordinance says, and clearly it hasn't been followed, is we had 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. So
Right.
that has always existed in there. And what I understand, though, having spoken to a number of persons who've been out there, is as early as, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right, but they were reserving and not engaging in activities. So I just think you need to kind of think about that. Not that,
Yeah.
I just see some problems that right at 9, you have 20 people trying to get 4 spots. So, what are the dynamics there? And we don't want, us vendors, we don't want, the police coming every day to have to try to, determine, okay, who got that spot today? You know what I'm saying?
From our standpoint, as an organization that's trying to be lean and mean with our resources, one of the reasons, to be perfectly blunt with you about permits is, permits cause a lot of administrative, work for people. And it's not the work that we're afraid of, it's just we got a harbor police department that's, relatively thin in terms of being able to cover everything all the time. Administrative staff, where if you start in on this, then it's, then you end up charging, money to make up for those administrative costs and things like that. So we want to experiment with a system that's as least restrictive as it can possibly be. And if we need to tighten it up from that point because we get exactly that kind of thing, I would see that we may do that. I certainly, it would be the last resort.
Well, that's 100% sure that's going to
Sir,
happen.
sir, hang on,
especially
please.
in Seaport Village.
Yeah, well,
Oh, you're not done,
I
sorry.
wanted to talk about zone 2 because right there you have the trolley stop. And I just don't see how you get a 6 foot out when that trolley booth is way out into the walkway. I don't know if you've seen it, and now they're putting like cones in front of it too. So I think you just need to look at, that kind of activity. And then the last thing, and that's zone 2.
That's,
Right
you're
at
in the old ordinance.
Oh, I'm sorry, but it's still zone 2 on this, I think? Yeah, because the trolley thing is kind of right here, and you have allocated 4 spots.
Well, we had heard that before. We thought we had it in the right spot that was away from the trolley. But
Gotcha.
Thank you.
And then the last question I have is that 2x2 sign. I think you guys have to decide exactly, is it the name of your company? Is it is it your price list? Is it showing your product? What is that display sign? Because I can see some problems, with, like I display my, my name art. You know what I'm saying? Is that a sign? Is that a, because it's got to communicate a value. So I just think we need to have a definition of what that sign is.
Okay.
But great job.
Thanks.
Sir, and then we'll go to you, ma'am.
So I have two questions. One I would like to kind of know is, with the new envisionary project, is this going to continue on, like this type of ordinance, once that's finished?
Well, that's one of the things is, construction and other things, because right now the first phase of the north Embarcadero construction, which goes between, as you probably know, the north side of Navy Pier and the south side of B Street, that may cause the dynamic here to change once we get this into place. So again, if there is construction that requires anybody to be temporarily moved, then of course we'll need to do that. But the other part of it is, once it is constructed, then we rethink what that area looks like and what fits where.
And then the other question would be then, because I run a tour outfit here in San Diego,
Right.
and I find that that whole area can become really quickly blighted with not having jury people down there. So personally, on my side, I would like to see a little bit more regulation as far as not just anybody showing up and being able to provide or show their wares down there, because I think you're going to end up getting a lot of riffraff and a lot of junk. That's also going to take away from the beauty of the Embarcadero parks. So I would like in the future, maybe at least once construction's done, I would like to eventually see it more juried, almost like as if you're at an art show, because then I think you're going to get a much more high caliber, person down there displaying their wares. Because otherwise we could end up kind of like in Venice Beach. Personally, I don't want a Venice Beach here in San Diego. In Venice Beach, I feel like it's blighted. Yeah, that's my thoughts.
Okay, as far as the, uh-oh, did you over here? Thank you. Yes, as far as the time allotment, I think that it should go, because I've had to get up out my bed at 2 in the morning just to get down to Seaport to get a spot, because I knew someone was going to be coming, dropping their stuff off at 3 or 4 and taking off and coming back at 12 in the afternoon. I think that if you come in the morning and you're there and you're setting up and you stay with your booth, then you're physically there. You're ready to work when work starts. As far as the 2x2 foot allotment of a sign, the signage, I think that as long as that sign fits within your allotted area and is not too tall or too big or too wide, I think that it should be allowed bigger than 2x2, because you have to understand that you want to attract people to your booth at a distance. Oh, look at there, he's doing pictures, or look at there, she's doing psychic work. So it's going to really, as long as it fits within your area, I don't think that it should be as small as 2x2, because most people nowadays can't see.
Actually, the ordinance has, what are you saying? Actually, the ordinance shows 2 square feet, which is only, 1.4 basically by something like that, 1.4 or less.
So I'm proposing that we change
We're,
that.
understood. I was just being clear that that's what the actual ordinance is.
And as far as the time, as long as you are with your property, setting up, then, I think that, and not leaving or reserving, it is fair to let people come in and set up.
Do they have to stay with it?
Yes.
Well, once they've set up, ordinarily they're going to want to stay with it.
No, some people drop them off and leave.
Yeah, if somebody drops their stuff off and leaves and we arrive and nobody's there, their stuff will likely be removed.
Okay.
So you're saying you can't use the restroom, or you're saying you can't?
You can use the
You know what I
Well,
mean?
no, but we are talking about somebody dropping their stuff off at 2 in the
Right.
morning and showing back up at noon. That's not
That's
appropriate.
not
It's not fair to
Again,
everybody else.
we're looking just, could have some skeptics in the
No,
audience.
there's no storage of items in the bushes. The port is trying to keep the bushes clear and free, and we're trying to keep our landscaping nice. Storing stuff in the bushes, attaching things to fences or trees, it's not allowed.
I have a few-part question. I do make jewelry, I do work with gold and silver, I do wire wrapping, I do soldering and make glass, spiders, all kinds of things. Who determines what's art? If we don't have to go to the coast because we're art, how do you determine that? That's my first part. Second part is, if we're allocated a spot, and somebody takes a spot to piggyback on this lady, how do we let them know that this is our spot? I've been in mine for over 6 years. If I can keep the spot and somebody else comes, what do you do about that? Also, I was going to ask you, with the space consideration that you're telling us now, I just have a table. Sometimes I'll put up an umbrella if it's hot. Would that fall within the guidelines, or is that too much space? It's just a standard table?
The ordinance itself has what I think is pretty explicit language, but if there's something in there that isn't clear to you about what the size of the table setup or the sign of the umbrella or enclosure looks like, then by all means let us know.
Well, it's not an enclosure, it's just a table with an umbrella behind it.
Understood, but those are the types of things that are in there by way of
When you made the space
guidelines.
allocation, did you take in consideration, a lot of us just have a table, and that's it?
Yes, we did.
Okay, thank you.
So,
I lost what I was going to say. On the spaces, when you can come in Balboa Park and Coronado, and when I ran the art club in the port for a while, it is kind of first come, first serve in Balboa Park and all the rest of them, but you have to set up. If you arrive, you have to set everything up, and you have to be there. So that's how they've handled that.
and again, if somebody is set up in an area, to your point, if they need to use the restroom or go get a drink or something like that,
Yeah.
and we hope everybody
They
is.
don't put a chair down to reserve or something like that.
Yeah, it's a matter of civility and politeness.
Yeah.
Was that a question or just a statement?
I think it was
That was a statement.
about
Yeah.
how